you're doing a really complicated job, the amount of information that you have on any given subject at any given point is actually very small.
So is it better then to know a little bit about a lot versus a lot about a little bit?
Knowledge is not that important. We just talked about knowledge is going to be available in a machine. So who cares about knowledge? To know a problem, you got to explore, which means you got to go where no one else has gone.
We're making your work really hard.
Tiger, Gianni, what would you say if I said, thanks to AI, jobs are dead, but work isn't?
I think the first question to ask is, are there going to be problems that need to be solved? I don't think we need a debate on that. To solve a problem, you need stuff to happen, thinking to happen, action to happen, and behaviors to change. That's work. And that creates jobs. So will the world ever be in a place where there is no problem to solve and no opportunity to exploit and no new things to do? The answer is no, never. Well, no. There will be a time when that will happen, when there's no life at all on Earth.
So we're living in the age of AI. Some people don't, those terms are bantered around. Some people don't really understand what that even means for them. But we know that a lot needs to change. We know that companies need to change. But what does that mean? What are they doing wrong?
When someone says that they need to change or someone else needs to change, it has nothing to do necessarily with anything they're doing wrong. The environment has changed, so they need to change. That's the definition of evolution. Those who change faster, better, and more adaptable survive. Those who don't. And when I say survive, I actually mean thrive and multiply more. So the definition of life is adaptation, consuming energy in order to reproduce. That's it. That's life and that's evolution. That requires change, continuous change. I mean, our bodies are changing every day, every minute. There's mutations happening every day. So I don't think change is necessarily about someone doing anything wrong. And I think that's part of the problem that the world has, which is it's assumed that if I'm asking you to change, it means you're wrong and there's something wrong you're doing. No.
What would you say, though, Gianni, if I said companies are still operating in the old industrial revolution times, quite rigid? What would you say?
So maybe not industrial revolution, but certainly more rigid than what we will see companies operating in 10, 20 years. Yeah, I mean, this is, the AI revolution fundamentally is a knowledge and information technology revolution, a big one because it gets into the hands of everyone. And as you do that, you think about it as a way of multiplying the impact of people working together in processes, in teams, individually as well. Most companies don't think about it that way. I mean, if you take that evolutionary perspective that Tiger just talked about, when nature discovered, for example, myelin is what makes the neurons connect with each other without losing too much energy. Brains became exponentially bigger, and as they became exponentially bigger, they could do exponentially more things. Now, if you think about companies as collective brains, they're not brains, but they are cognitive machines. What is this going to do to them? And my perspective is going to give companies that embrace that new power exponentially more capabilities, because they all of a sudden they can make everybody as smart as individual people for everything, on top of making people connect with each other in ways that couldn't be possible before. And when we've seen that in old ages, so the internet was one, but again, I was talking about the brain millions of years ago, you have incredible things happening. So we don't quite know where we're going to end up with. So I don't know if it's wrong, but from a competitive standpoint, companies that will get there first, they will accelerate past the ones that don't do. And maybe from that standpoint, they would have taken the wrong turn.
So you started to talk there about being interconnected, connecting people. How does AI play into that?
There's two things. So it's people with people, and information technology allows more people to get connected productively, right? In the past, we could be, 3 people talking to each other. Then you had the telephone, you had other things. But the other thing is people with machines and machines with machines. So if you think of that network expands in a productive way, which basically means whenever we are in the loop, these machines need to curate knowledge for us because we find it super hard to deal with too much input at the same time. Machines don't care as much. And so AI the first thing it will do, it will find the right people in the network to talk to, or the right machines in the network to talk to. And then it will curate the right signals from these machines so that we can process stuff. So they can help at the very least at those two levels. I also think that machines will be able to help us collaborate more. So we've seen it during COVID. I mean, if we didn't have things like Zoom and Teams, etc., we would have been dead in the water. But it really helped us connect and collaborate in many different ways compared to what we could do before. And I think this is just the beginning. Now the new machines will help us do that even more.
Interesting, because people are still stuck in a job, right, which has very fixed parameters, doesn't it? So this is your job. You have a boss above you. These are the skills that we're going to ask you to do. And this is the department that you sit in. End of story. And if you do really well, you'll get to the next level. But moving between, I mean, I used to work at Google and it was just like, wow, it was quite a mission. And that was in a very forward-looking company. Quite a mission to move between departments. How do you see that changing?
Yes, and that's not necessarily just because of AI. I think we've gotten better at organizing people, also because of the technologies that we have. But the reality, what we are talking about is find people who have certain skills, who can collaborate with others to do certain things, or can collaborate with machines. To your point, you don't need the job description the way you used to have. I mean, you can actually go to a skill level and then connect them. Jobs at the end of the day are a collection of skills. It's like, master data that you put it together, and it's convenient, it's easy for people to process. But yeah, so that will certainly, and yeah, quite a few examples of that. I mean, the best knowledge repository in the world is Wikipedia, and doesn't have jobs the same way we used to have. And so you think about most value in the world today in companies made because of the processing of knowledge. Well, then, you have companies that operate more like communities. Hierarchical networks are not the only way to organize.
I want to go back to add to what Gianni said, which is very important, which is connecting brains creates super brains. That connecting brains started happening early steps with the internet. But the internet only allowed information that's sitting in each person's brains to be put onto a common place, and it became visible to other people if they knew what to look for, where to look for it, etc., etc. What AI is doing is actually creating, for lack of any other word, a central control tower, control nervous system that actually connects to all the brains and then does stuff with it and recognizes patterns and gives it back to everyone who wants to know an answer to anything. If you go back to evolution, again, I keep going back to evolution because I think there are so many parallels. In the evolution of intelligence, it all started with a single cell. A single cell, by the way, had intelligence. If you define intelligence as deliberately doing something, and a single cell used to just wait, and when food came along, it gobbled it up.
Yeah.
Because it could not move, it could not discover food, it did nothing, it just stayed in one place. The first step of intelligence progression was two cells coming together. Now two brains came together. And that started the journey of multicellular progression into invertebrates, into vertebrates, into mammals, into chimpanzees, and then a branch of that becoming hominins and Homo sapiens. At every step of that way, there's many breakthroughs that created intelligence. I think one of the single biggest breakthroughs was when more and more neurons started talking to each other and recognizing patterns and giving it. To your question on people are specialized in the work they do. Well, actually, they're specialized because they've become specialized. And if you take away that work and say, not needed anymore, there are two things that can happen. Either that person with the brain adapts and says, okay, let me learn new work. And if the person does that, then the person becomes valuable in that new work.
Yeah.
Or the person says, I can't do anything, or I don't want to learn, then that cell dies. By the way, this is exactly what happens to cells. When people become blind, the portions of the brain that used to process optic information coming from the eyes over time gets reprogrammed for whatever senses and sensory information is coming in, which is why people who are blind, if they really practice enough, can actually hear better than anyone else in the world. They can actually sense better than anyone else in the world, because bigger portions of the brain, which is bigger portions of neurons, are working on a new job. And the new job is, I want to process sound signals. I used to process light signals. I know how to process signals. My job was to process light signals. I've got recrafted because light signals don't come in anymore, so it's useless. So I die. But some of me reprograms myself into now learning how to process sound signals. And I think that's part of the same thing that's going to happen now at a human level, where, and to conclude where Gianni concluded, which is, unfortunately, not everyone wants to change, is willing to change, and is wanting to go through the pain of changing. I actually don't want to say not everyone is capable of changing, because I think everyone is capable of changing. It's actually, do they want to, and do they want to spend the energy and time to do it? If they do, they're going to thrive in the new world with new skills and new thing and new thing and new thing. That applies to companies as well. Those who embrace all this new stuff and learn new ways of doing things are going to thrive. 50% of the companies. The other 50% will not change, don't want to change, or basically said, this is not for me. They die.
Yeah.
Individuals die without changing. Organizations will die without changing. So that's, and it's again, exactly what evolution does.
It is. It's interesting that, Tiger, you say that don't see change as a threat, see it as an opportunity to grow. Okay. So when we do hear about jobs going, and they will go, thanks to automation, I just wonder whether these jobs are going to be going in the more traditionally structured companies versus those that are more skills-based companies. And what do we even mean by skill-based companies anyway, Gianni?
Research has shown that people are way less likely to buy from organizations. People buy from people who they know, like, and trust. If you are a leader in industry, if you are a founder or an entrepreneur, you will have a strong growth story. And the smartest investment that you can make with your time is to share that growth story. If you like the look of these podcasts and you would like to have the full studio and photography experience at our London-based studios, then reach out to me. You'll find the details in the description.
What do we even mean by skill-based companies anyway, Gianni?
Basically what a skill-based organization is, it says, forget about your curriculum in general. Tell me which skills you have. I don't care about your degrees. I don't care about your job title before. But if you can do these 3 things that I need somewhere else, I can actually give you work that way. So you literally move away from the definition of what you're able to as a degree or as a job title into the more granular components. You can demonstrate those components, you can test for those components, and then you can be reallocated somewhere else, which is what some companies, for example, do when they say, I'm going to take kids for programming because I don't really need a ton of stuff. I just need a few of the skills. So it's a possibility. Some companies are going down that path. I would say, to Tiger's point, it's actually interesting. Most companies could do some of that. Yeah, you don't need to just go, sink and barrel inside that thing fully. You can do some of that. You can start by building skill inventories, and then little by little you give people access to things that wouldn't have been possible if you just looked at their organizational affiliation or their job profile. And I think most companies can do some of that.
If I heard you correctly, it's no longer important to go to the particular school or a university. I come from a background of where hiring at Microsoft and Google was all about going to hire at target schools, elite institutions. But you're saying that, no, it's no longer about the degree. It's about these skills that you have.
So can I double click on that for a second? Because when you work in a company, there's one certainty, which is you operate under uncertainty and with incomplete information, right? Mm-hmm. That's the difference between academics and companies. And degrees are a signaling mechanism that basically tells you that person has acquired a certain amount of skills to a quality level that you might find appropriate. Now, that is one of the ways that you could display that capability. For example, there's been discussions around if we were able to test people in a better way, we would actually not need as much credentialization through those university institutions. The reality is that those testing mechanisms aren't super perfect, and when you do job interviews, you're doing some of that. But as we all know, it's a bit of a hit and miss at times. Yeah. Sometimes you have an error A type or a B type, meaning you don't take the people you should take, or you take the people you shouldn't take. So if you look at the future, I think there's other ways of doing that. So the potentially credentialization through the big brand of the university, etc., could go away. But it's going to be a process. I don't think it's going to be a flip of a switch.
So I want to take what Gianni said and I'm going to make it extreme.
Go for it.
So I think there's a real problem in the current way credentialization is given importance. What does that mean? I think if you hire people the way we do today, which is where did you go and learn, and show me that you've learned it. Whatever the it is, doesn't matter what it is. So where, and show me what you learned, and I want to test it. That is making a couple of assumptions. One, whatever you learned, that's what I want, and maybe that's true. But if I change the lens to what I want today versus what I want tomorrow, it's pretty clear to me that what I want today is going to change tomorrow. Yeah. No question. And it's going to change faster. Whether we like it or not, that's happening much faster. So if I hire on the basis of you told me you know this, and that's why I'm hiring you, I think you're making a big mistake, because that thing that you're so good at is not needed tomorrow. We just talked about skills changing. So what I really want to ask is, do you know how to learn fast? Mm-hmm. Do you know how to embrace new stuff? Do you know how to throw away old things that you learned, that you loved? And today you're going to say, I'm going to learn new stuff. And does that energize you? First question. And if that's the kind of person you are, I think I want to hire you. I don't care what you know, because I know it's going to be useless tomorrow in any case. So I want to test for learnability and passion for learning. Second, credentialization through universities. Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial College, Harvard, MIT. The reason why right now it's important is because there's a good assumption made that there is a selection criteria that absorbs people into those places. So actually, I am being lazy by allowing someone else to do the testing of the right people, and then they hire those people. So I don't need to do all that stuff. So when I hire from Oxford, it's fine, because they've done some tests. And these are the best of the best, and I'm going to hire them. Two, I'm creating a collective of people inside Oxford, inside Harvard, who kind of are better than the others in terms of their learnability, hopefully. Because they don't know anything in any case when they enter Oxford. And they learn from each other, because Oxford creates an environment that connects those people's brains up. So I'm dependent on Oxford doing a great job at hiring fresh students, Oxford creating a great culture of learning, those students having a great learnability quotient. And then when I hire them, I'm hiring for what they learned there. Actually, I should be hiring for, do they have the learnability quotient? And are they coming from different environments where learnability quotient is being created? That's more important than anything else. Knowledge is not that important. We just talked about knowledge is going to be available in a machine. So who cares about knowledge? It's the ability to question that knowledge and explore, and have the ability to say, I don't know, so I'm going to learn. That's more important.
No, I'm sorry. We're making your work really hard. Just actually go follow what he's saying, because that has a big implication.
Yes.
If you really only mostly care about learnability quotient, are the best institutions, teaching institutions today, doing that job very well, both in terms of selection and then in terms of metacognition, which is teaching people how to learn? And I suspect that if you put those two on two dimensions, you should never do that on a podcast. But, it's just one is learnability quotient, the other one is quality of those universities. You'll have some sort of correlation. So the better university actually do better selection for learnability and teach learnability.
Yeah.
But I still think you'll probably have a lot of variance around that thing. And there will be courses, universities, educational institutions, that really excel at those two things. I'm going to take in people who can learn, and I'm going to make them even better learners, as opposed to their ability to store knowledge and regurgitate and do some of those things, which is, by the way, what we've been doing for thousands of years is not relevant anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's a very profound shift in how, I've been building learning organizations for a while.
Yeah.
It's not the same. Right? The way you curate information, you administer it, you get people to learn from each other is not exactly the same as making people learn things, memorize things.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
You're learning how to learn. That's the most important thing.
We've acknowledged that being a rigid organization is going to hurt you in terms of, you'll just lack the ability to be innovative. But why does that happen? So you've got these rigid organizations with fixed departments and fixed jobs and fixed skills. Then you bring along AI, and I've heard this term augmented, augmenting the intelligence of humans. Just explain that concept to me as well, augmentation of workers. What does that mean?
The lowest hanging and biggest fruit is augmenting human capabilities. All of us, just take an example. Former CEO. A lot of what all the leaders do, all the managers do, is to store information, and that experience makes them stronger. The reality is that if you're doing a really complicated job, the amount of information that you have on any given subject at any given point is actually very small. So what you really want to do is to be really good at being a beginner for anything you've been thrown at. A new client, a new industry, a new process, a new situation with the legal department, all that kind of stuff is what you really need to be able to bootstrap and then deliver and get people to deliver with you. AI can be really fabulous at augmenting you by just making you retrieve the relevant information faster so then you can process it. We already saw it when Google was launched. Many of us think differently compared to the way we used to think. Remember, we used to go to libraries and we had books and shelves and stuff.
I remember those days.
We all remember those days. But we kind of changed a little bit how we process stuff. And it's a lot more what is called T-shaped, right? You go deep in a few things, like a T, like a letter T, right?
Yeah.
You narrow but deep in very few things, but then you're shallow and very broad in many things. And the shallow and broad allows you to go and pull, the legal department, the data engineering people, the marketing people, what the sales people do. And this is our job. And AI can augment you in doing that. If you know how to engage AI, it will actually make you superhuman at becoming a very smart generalist who's able to interface with the specialists and really create breakthrough solutions. Very often these days, breakthrough solutions don't come from specialists going even deeper in their, in their hole. They do, some of that. At MIT, we have a bunch of them and they're really useful, but most of us are connectors of dots, and
Yes.
AI will augment us, not just individually, networks of people. You have a department. You were talking about the rigidity in organizations. One of the biggest problems is the companies that are more rigid, they prevent people from connecting dots with other people from other departments, which is actually very typically where the breakthroughs come from. They are not incentivized to go and talk to them. When they talk to them, they don't have the right capabilities to, learn each other's jargon. And I think the best companies do a good job at giving them the incentives and the tools to go talk to each other.
So it's interesting. You mentioned the word generalist there. Have you heard of the term creative generalist? Sounds a little bit more sexy. Creative generalist. What does that mean to you?
In the world, you have problems that belong to a continuum between known knowns, stuff that what the problem shape is and that solutions exist. then known unknowns, so you know what the shape is, but you don't quite know what the solution is. And then you have an unknown unknowns, the really hairball-y things that you really don't know what the perimeter is. And you know that the solutions that exist don't fully, things like climate change with, there's a bunch of unknown unknowns. A creative generalist is a person who's going to be able to work a lot on the unknown stuff, because they will be able not to just retrieve solutions that exist for a given problem, and not just find new solutions to given problems, but also define problems in a way that they become tractable.
Discover problems that right now we don't even know is a problem.
Exactly.
That's why it's called an unknown. Yeah. Solution is unknown. That's okay. That we know. Even the problem is not known. To know a problem, you got to explore, which means you got to go where no one else has gone, which means it's what humans have always done best whenever they've gone down a path of breakthrough. Machines will tackle the known and the known unknown problem. Humans are best because machines can't do it, which is the unknown.
So now when I think about a creative generalist, then now I'm starting to wonder, we talked about those that can go into the specialists, and then they go deep into a subject. It's pretty much how schools and colleges are teaching kids to learn today, right? Learn about these
in some parts of the world.
Right.
For example, I think one of the interesting differences between the let's call it the UK education system, and I'm generalizing here, so I'm sure people are going to get upset, but that's okay. That's never bothered me. The UK education system, and I grew up in a kind of a part of that when I grew up through the Indian education system, and the US education system is that there is this whole genre of liberal arts education where actually your objective is not to go deep, which is anathema to the UK education system.
Yes.
In liberal arts, you're supposed to do a little bit of lots of things for 4 years. And at the end of 4 years, you come out, you're an undergrad, and you've done all kinds of things. And you look at it and say, wow, that's completely unconnected. I just met someone yesterday, and she's finishing her third year at Stanford. And she is doing political science and discrimination. And she's doing AI and machine learning in Stanford. She's got awards for both. And her objective is to try and find a way to use AI machine learning in legal, in justice, in making sure that justice prevails. There's fairness and justice, all of that. I mean, those are not the normal topics that you find in many universities come together. They should. And the tragedy is that academic institutions are siloed.
Yes, it is a big tragedy.
Yeah, just as organizations are siloed.
Right. So now when I go back to this creative generalist, what you've just said there, Tiger, about going broad and connecting dots as well. So is it better then to know a little bit about a lot versus a lot about a little bit?
He's the master at that, Gianni.
Maybe that's a compliment.
No, you taught me the alphabet T and what it means in knowledge and learning. So I think you teed it up initially, but you should. That's the answer.
Yeah.
And so tell me more about where you want to go with that question, because I mean it can be very deep.
All right, maybe it's a bit of both. But if you know a lot about a little bit, you feel like I know it all. What's the point of learning more?
I think
I didn't finish.
Sorry. Thank you.
Let me just, because I'm very excited.
Go.
But then, because I'll lose my train. But then, if you know a little bit about a lot, then you think like, well, I only know a little bit about this and a little bit about that. There's between here and here, there's a gap. And I need to fill it. Therefore, I need to constantly learn, because I can't assume that I know it all. Whereas a know-it-all is someone who's specialized in one area or two, feels like they know it all. Therefore, they're not going to strive to continue learning. They feel they know it all. Why would you learn what you feel like you already know? I finished.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I think we should define, and I don't want to be academic at all. I mean, this is actually very, very concrete implications for hiring, training, developing talent management, all that kind of stuff. So let's really get there in a moment. I don't know if the definition of knowing is current.
Yeah.
Because what I said before, if you go into a job that is worth doing, your domain knowledge will change all the time. What is really distinctive is your ability to accumulate it fast for the things that are worth accumulating, and then connecting the dots. For example, just to actually give very specific examples. Some of us have been in this AI thing since the first generation of AI came through, etc.
Which was when?
2014, you started to have machine learning and predictive artificial intelligence, and we would use it to finance, to risk management, to content moderation, to all those things. And back then, what we realized is that the most useful people we had were not the people who could go like 7 stories deep into machine learning and 7 stories deep into, I don't know, KYC, know your customer for banks, right? But obviously those were very useful, but we needed to have people who were able to connect those dots and say, how do I industrialize a machinery that allows me to do anti-money laundering protection by using machine learning? And these are the kind of things. And a lot of those competencies didn't exist, right? We went in, say, 2012, 13. Obviously, some people had been doing that kind of work for a long time. But the most useful people were the people who could build new knowledge fast to the level of depth that was necessary to then create solutions that would really embrace what needed to be done with the new technology that we had. The problem with people who were super deep and didn't want to do that job is that they would actually have the right answer for the wrong problem. Meaning they wouldn't define, back to the point of, they were problem solvers, but they weren't problem finders. And unless you scope the problem well, and this is one of the things that when you do, for example, innovation and creativity, there's a religion that we have, which is basically to say, you have to fall in love with the problem before you fall in love with the solution. Yep. The problem, a bunch of people would know a lot, they don't fall in love with new problems anymore. They kind of keep on falling in love with their solutions, but then sometimes that is not, it's like what you did before. You interrupted me because you wanted to make sure that the question was clear. And people who know a bunch, which, by the way, I tend to do a bunch of those stuff and I make that mistake. Sometimes we go down our rut as opposed to what is really the problem that we're trying to. So the knowledge that I think matters, and I'll close it, is how do we know how to find and define problems in a way that they become tractable with the stuff that we have today? So a bunch of people say, well, this problem cannot be solvable, we just wait for a new technology to come up. And most of the breakthroughs in technology we had have been things in which people like, Steve Jobs said, to hell with that. I think I have enough from all these different pieces and I'm going to put them together. And what I solve for is not to have the telephone that makes the best calls in the world. It's a thing that brings together a bunch of things that will make people delighted. And so the real knowledge is, what we will want to hire for is people who are able to do that job, among obviously people who have domain expertise.
So one final, wrapper on that answer is, to your question, I don't think it's an either or for an individual. I think an individual can thrive by going deep in one topic for their entire life. Or an individual can be an amazing dot connector horizontally. What is important is when you have a team, when you have a company, you have a mixture of those people. Right. It was always important. I think many breakthroughs in the last 100 years have happened through a combination of people who are deep and people who connected. Some of them were the same individual. Steve Jobs, Edison. I just came back from Serbia and Belgrade, so Nikola Tesla. These were people who had both. Now that's a really extremely edgy, unique human being. But businesses and teams that actually came together, some were deep and some were broad, actually found a... Now, in today's world, there is a problem and an opportunity. The problem is that because AI is going to be able to connect many people who've gone very deep at rapid pace. There are going to be people and teams who are going to be able to leverage that, and they will win big time and very fast. And those who don't are going to lose big time. Earlier, if I didn't bring a team together that was deep and broad, then I'll lose, but I won't lose big time, and it'll take me a long time to lose big time. Those kind of changes of one team being different from another team because this team uses AI to leverage breadth and depth, and this team doesn't do it, and the technology is available to both. They don't use it, these guys use it, these guys are going to win. And their win will be 1,000 to 1, 1,000,000 to 1, which is why you have companies that are breakthrough curves of growth. And in the same industry, there are companies that have died.
Okay, so those that do plummet, and there's those that will supercharge up, right? The ones that will supercharge up are the ones that have employees that have skills or abilities and mindset to look for problems. Because they are able to ask the right questions, they're looking for the problem, they are able to think above and beyond what their normal skill was. With AI, they've become almost like an expert at their job. And now with AI, it can identify these experts across the organization. It can connect them up as well. My first question is then, can anybody become that expert? Or is it going to be somebody more like the generalist? Because the generalist is able to connect dots that you wouldn't normally connect because they're thinking outside of their domain, because they're a generalist. Because AI can make all of us experts, but do we have levels of that as well? So is the generalist then the better expert? That's my first question is, can anybody be an expert?
Back to my initial answer, which is I think you need both. And I think the starting point is what drives you and what brings passion to you, what motivates you. By the way, there's one big difference between a machine and a human. So far, a machine has not been found to have self-motivation. Humans have self-motivation. And that then creates neuromodulators that, secrete dopamine that then says, hey, do this, keep doing it. That's not the case in the case of machines yet. You decide whether you want to go deep or you want to go broad. Either one of those choices is actually great. You got to be passionate about whichever choice you make. Whichever choice you make, you have an opportunity to leverage AI. Because if you want to go deep, then you've hit now 1,000 meters deep inside the earth. To go to the next 1 meter, you need AI to kind of tell you what is the information you have that 1,000 meters deep that tells you this is the right way to go to the next 1 meter. Mm-hmm. That's I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper, and AI is helping me recognize the pattern of what next step is the right next step to take based on all the things that I've done to get me to this 1,000 meter mark. At the same time, I could be another person who actually leverages these various people who've gone deep, 1,000 meters deep in various different holes, and they're all deep there. They actually don't connect the dots, but there are these other people who connect the dots. Mm-hmm. Two things have to happen. The ether, environment, atmosphere, culture in which these deep people and connectors exist is one where the deep people happily basically say, tell me what you want to do to connect, because I am not interested and I can't. So they happily share their information and also listen to the people who connect and say, what exactly do you want? And then they go deep and try and find that in their depth. And the reverse, which is these people who connect, they know they are shallow. So they actually reach out to these people and say, give me information from that depth. So it's actually that culture of creating this combination and making the combination work with each other. Again, back to Gianni's point of a network that makes that supermind even more supermind.
Okay.
is what will create value and differentiation and winners.
Right. Okay. So I think I'm starting to understand it then. So those companies that will excel, that supercharge, have this fluidity across functions, across the entire organization, which almost feels like an on-demand. We've got a problem here. We will go to this person. We've identified them because AI has enabled us to identify them. They're sitting over here. And because it's more like kind of like a gig economy internally, people are available on demand. Does that make sense? You've got teams of people who can say, yes, we've got the skill set for this problem that's coming up, and we're on it. We're available immediately. We can retrieve information immediately. We're on it. It's not our department, but it's skills-based. It's more of a project-based environment.
I wouldn't say that 100% of people will need to do that, but in every company, like in every organism, part of the organism is optimized for scale, and part of the organism is optimized for agility.
Yeah.
If you look at your own body, part of our muscle mass is there for sustaining your spinal cord and all that kind of stuff. That's actually not for agility. You actually don't want to have much agility around your vertebrae, but there's a bunch of other parts. In companies, it's the same, right? You need to be deliberate about always keeping a certain amount of agility in the right places and not forcing agility to places that need to scale up, because people get choked pretty quickly if you ask them to do too many different things. You need to still maintain. It's interesting because the biological analogies are really strong. You have stem cells. A stem cell can actually, Tiger was talking about the brain that's plastic and certain parts of the brain can be repurposed. You have the same in people, right? You have people who are there to just do the machinery work scaling every day, but you still want to have some of them able to be redeployed as a stem cell would to somewhere else if that line of business goes down. So you never really want to have too many people who only know how to do one job, and that you're not going to be able to reskill them. I mean, this is actually one of the things that we spent a ton of time on, because if that line of business goes down, you want to switch them off and put them somewhere else. And that requires intentional, deliberate energy and resources, even when the things go well. Actually, especially when the things go well, and you say, I could scale this forever. But you still want to have some muscle for agility, because at some point you're going to have a turn in the road, and then your organizational reaction is not going to be sufficient. So not everybody is not like a children football, right? Not everybody after the same ball, but people need to be able to be a little ambidextrous, so that if at some point they need to shoot with their left foot, they are kind of going to be able to learn how to do that.
So it's really interesting that that's one of the reasons. What Gianni just described is one of the reasons why 3 or 4 things have happened historically in the world in business, and I think they'll happen even more in the future. Thing number 1 is, scale is important. Large companies, large businesses in various environments have always found ways to be successful. But if they end up being too siloed, too rigid, too unadaptable, too non-agile, then over time, they've led to failures. Large company failures, if you can trace the root causes of that, I think a number of them would be because they were not agile enough, they didn't change enough, they didn't pivot enough. When did we last hear of a large organization pivoting? Rare. Small startups have always grown up with small agile teams that have a combination of a few people who are deep and many people who basically say, what do I need to do today? Do I need to be the janitor? Do I need to type this note? Do I need to sign a contract? Do I need to go and sell? Do I need to help you, do better coding? And then what's a new problem I want to solve? I tried to solve this problem yesterday, but it didn't work. So what's our new business today? So they keep pivoting. Mm-hmm. That was always the case. And that's why startups, in some cases, ended up succeeding. And in some cases, scaled organizations failed. What has changed is the speed at which that is happening now and will happen in the future is way more than ever before. Because everything has got turbocharged with speed driven by AI. I can now use AI as a startup to enter territory that no one else has entered before and required scale to enter. You don't require scale to enter many territories anymore. I can dream up a new food, and I know this because I spoke to someone just a couple of months back. She invented in her brain a new biscuit nutrition. And from the time she came up with the idea, she launched it literally in one market 60 days later, and 180 days later, that biscuit was available in 50 countries. Her team, 3 people. It was impossible, meaning literally not possible to have managed to do that 30 years back, 40 years back when I started working in consumer goods. Not possible. I can dream up whatever I want. What did she do? She found a bunch of people who were deep nutritionists. She hired them for 2 hours, 3 hours a month to be a board, a group of people whom she could use as sounding boards. She went and spoke to a large manufacturer and said, "Can you do contract manufacturing for me?" She negotiated with Amazon to launch her product in one market. And they said, "Okay, you give me the product, I'm not going to pay you. Depending on what sells, I'll pay you." And she said, "Yeah, that's fine." Then within 30 days of launch, someone in New Zealand discovered the product on the Amazon website in the country she launched in and said, "Can I have that biscuit? Because I've heard my sister talk about it through social media in the UK." And this woman came and said, "Yeah, I can have it delivered to you in New Zealand." That's it. That's how it grew. All advertising was digital marketing. All advertising was social. That's it.
So actually, AI helps with the
Everything.
marketing part, but also just to, again, example of portability, what they said. There's a lot of talk right now. We're talking about small organizations that can actually punch way above their weight because of the capabilities that AI will give them. I mean, in this case, for example, there's a lot of research around what is called synthetic market research, right? Literally, you have synthetic artificial personas that you can bounce off ideas. There's been quite a lot of research that shows that that happens. But also there's companies out there who have IT teams that are too small to, in theory, have all the specializations that they need in data engineering, this kind of coding. And instead, through AI now, these people who are a little more generalist, they can actually do very pointed specialist IT jobs because the machines will help them go a little deeper in that kind of data engineering, in that kind of data treatment, or that kind of coding, that software type. And in the past, you would have needed to hire 50 people to do that because you needed to have the skills. And that allows you to turn this generalist, IT generalist, into somewhat more of a specialist. And that allows you to go a lot more agile because, to hire 50 good people in a startup, you can't do it, right? I mean, and if you can keep the team small, but still able to deliver specialist stuff, then you win, right? So that's just a very simple example of things that we will see a lot more of.
Gianni, I think you described this really well, which is if you take any skill, you can create a normal distribution of people. At one end of the distribution, there are people who know very little. At the middle, there are reasonably average skilled people. And then at the extreme, there's deep expert in that skill. So you have full distribution, like any other normal distribution. I think you have a view on what AI is beginning to do in almost every skill, which is to move that population, which is a normal distribution. It's no longer normal, or it's a new normal.
You can take people who are at the bottom of that distribution. All of us actually are at the bottom of the
on many skills.
Some skills, right?
Yeah.
And actually, some of us don't care to admit it, but and by the way, the ones who do fare better. But you can actually become a much better, maybe not an expert, but a much better kind of middle of the pack on anything.
On anything.
Yes.
And for the people who are at the top of the distribution in one skill, as we talked about before, very often your breakthroughs come from you picking up ideas from other fields. And that will allow you actually to discover things on which you are not that good. And machines will actually help you complement skills that are very strong in you, but with other things that you would have never. So, examples, for example, at MIT, there's people in the engineering department who actually look at biology as an inspiration for materials.
Yep.
And these people are not biologists. And they work with machines, back to the point of Tiger, I always like to think of why, what, how. The machine will actually tell you how to do things increasingly if you ask it to solve. So you tell it what is it that you're trying to solve and why you're trying to. And the human will actually be typically better than the machine at saying why you need to solve certain things. So that's the synergy, and you do see people who are at the top of their distribution in their field being able to go even further, because all of a sudden the machine gives them new perspectives from other fields, right? And the what in the middle, in innovation, you use analogies as a way for people to create new perspectives on a problem. Humans are really good, and machines actually complement humans. We've done a lot of work at MIT on this. They bring out analogies that you would not have thought of, and then with an analogy in mind, you turn around as a human and you say, I want you to think about how materials break in a tree, on a branch, at high speed. And when you have done that, tell me how that impacts this engineering material that I need to put on an airplane, because there may be molecular similarities, but I'm not a biologist. I don't know how branches break. And they come up with actually really interesting results. And AI can really help you connect those dots. It's actually pretty fabulous.
Yeah. And those experts, in a world where they had a team of 100 people doing a bunch of things, and of which 10 of them were experts, and the leader was an expert, but they had 90 other people who were distributed. All of a sudden, 40 of them have moved to the middle of expertise from being at the bottom of expertise. So now this group of experts can depend on doing normal stuff with a much stronger middle. And therefore, they have more time to do what they are really good at, because they are experts of connecting the dots. Now, they need a headset to be able to do that, because if they think that my job is this expert and I'm going to find my solution myself, and that's all that matters, then they will not get the breakthrough. They'll get the breakthrough if they tap into this network of other experts in other topics, and then the breakthrough happens.
Are we then going to live in a world or work in organizations that value skills more than years of experience?
I think it's already happening. I think it's already happening. I think more sophisticated organizations, small or big, are changing the way they hire to what is it that I'm hiring for to complement my team. So it's always in the context of my team. Just because you're fantastic at something, I don't have a need for you, because I already have such people. My need is something else. But even more importantly, are you the kind of person who can adapt and learn? And are you going to be able to transfer this great thing that you have to other people so that they can connect the dots and create breakthroughs? So I think it's already happening, where spending time on figuring out what is the knowledge you have, I think, is becoming less and less important in getting hired.
I think initially, in order to build these AI capabilities internally, I was reading that a lot of them were hiring new grads, just fresh grads with strong IT skills. So then you would get these tech savvy young people who, and just naturally young people are more prone to experiment and ask big questions. They are cheaper to hire as well. So now you have this young spark coming into an organization, strong IT skills, fearless with their questioning, and they are comfortable with the AI, and they're adding impact immediately, versus a veteran in the organization who's more rigid because that's all he or she knows. So this raises interesting questions then about how people get promoted internally. We are looking at more flatter organizations as well, aren't we, though, naturally, because you've got much younger people coming in, I'm assuming. But what does this do to the hierarchical structure? You know, how people get promoted?
Promoted is one thing, but actually the first thing that you need to think about is what are you trying to do, and is that the most effective way of doing what you're trying to do, right? But hierarchical organizations have always been there because first, the environment was a little more stable in the past, and second, because the way to get to people to collaborate was slow and required to have a certain stability of those things. Increasingly, you actually see people, the teams that come together and disband. Agile has been there for a long time. So I think the implication, though, I think we actually touched on a very important thing, which is what is the value of experience and tenure? More tenured people, there's a risk that they are not going to be able to make the cut because a bunch of the skills that they developed are not current anymore. I mean, if you see it actually more strongly in software coding. If you've been a coder for 30 years, the code that you were writing 10 years ago is actually of zero value to anyone. Zero. And people don't care if you've done that for 20 years. You're super deep. Maybe you find a couple of people still write COBOL, but that's it. What really matters is that you're able to, every couple of years, you pick up new things. The advantage that older people have, because they still have at least two advantages. One, they tend to work with people better. Because humans don't change as fast as machines. And in order to get things done, typically you need to work with humans, right? And there's a lot of things. In fact, Tiger was talking about being able to get out of bed in the morning and go do the things that need to be doing, right? I mean, This is actually a skill that a lot of kids learn. But there's value in having been there for 30 years, getting out of bed every single day and going into the things that matter. So that's the first thing. The second thing, you might have pattern recognition. I mean, there's some things that you did in the past that are not exactly, I'll give you an example. If I do data engineering today or data science, a lot of statistical methods that you might have seen in the past might actually transfer somewhat in what you're doing today. So you have new tools to do that thing, but the way you ask questions, for example, and the way you frame those questions so that they're tractable is pattern recognition. And that you develop over time. For example, one of the things that older people are better at typically is synthesizing information. They're much better at typically going faster to the gist. 80-20, right? Was this the 20% of this thing that really does 80%? And typically younger people lack that ability. Maybe because our educational institution did not pay all that much attention. This is something that you build organically. So I actually wouldn't count more tenured people out. I would actually count them out if they weren't able to recognize that the stored knowledge that they have is less and less important. And what really matters is this ability to do pattern recognition and work with other people and being open to pick up new domains as they go. By the way, when I said if, it's a big if. And whenever there's a big if, you have a big chunk of population that will go the way of the dodo, right? And that we don't want, because that will create a lot of social unrest. I think governments are already doing a pretty poor job at guiding people. This conversation that we're having as a casual banter, why is it that we don't hear more about it in the press? The only thing we hear in the press is, the catastrophe. Reorient people, guide people, educational institution, continuous learning. People need to give 5% of their time to learn. There needs to be incentives, tax incentives, all that kind of stuff is what is going to differentiate a thriving country from a declining country and society.
Yeah. It's interesting what you gentlemen are saying, because it sounds like you're saying reframe your thinking, because we hear a lot of leaders are anxious, lots of news headlines about jobs being displaced. And so they're fearful. And if you think about it psychologically, we fear every time we think that we're going to lose something or have less of something or never have something, that does something to our brains, doesn't it? Right? It shrinks our brains. It's fear. So I think what you gentlemen are saying is saying, no, you've got the people. You don't need to go hire new grads. You have the people, nurture the people, grow the people.
And make learning the core agenda of the company. So, for many years, financially, the way to evaluate organizations has been growth, margin, earnings per share, etc. The more sophisticated way of evaluating companies so far has been, show me what are the steps you're taking so that this cash flow, margin, EPS, and growth that you're showing is sustainable for the next 3, 5, 10 years. So that I think the market's big, you're gaining share. So lots of things I can look at and say, this is going to continue. I think in some industries, in some manufacturing and life sciences kind of companies, one of the other things people look at is, what are you investing in R&D? Because I know it takes 5 years to get a breakthrough. If you're spending money today, and you've in the past demonstrated when you spend X million dollars, you do create breakthroughs. A bunch of them fail, but you create breakthroughs. So you're spending 4% of your revenue on R&D, 9% of your revenue on R&D. So I know that you're one of the better people in the industry. So I'm going to bet that you're going to do well. There's a fourth dimension, which I think needs to come in. What is it that you're spending on learning? And I think if I encounter two companies, one company is spending X% of revenue every year on driving their organization to learn, which means I actually have a policy that is, I hire a person and I say, you're going to get paid $75,000 a year and you're going to get 15 days a year as paid for learning, and you have to show me that you've learned and I'm going to create opportunities for you to learn. That's my compensation structure. Why? Because I want to create value for the company. Now, I'm not doing a good thing for you. Also, I'm doing a good thing for you. But in reality, I'm driving value for the company. And the only way I can drive value is investing in training, just as I invest in R&D. I can measure that. I can count that. And if I'm doing that more than him, I should be more successful than him. Other things do matter, just as R&D itself is not good enough. But investing formally in countable time and money that I can see going into people spending time on learning. And then do you have people who know how to learn? So that's also important. If you have a bunch of people who know how to learn, but you're not providing them opportunity formally to learn, not once, not twice, but forever. This is not a one-time thing. This thing is going to keep changing. So you hired this person 4 years back. You don't have a learning culture and you're not created opportunities for the person to learn because you've not given the person time to learn. The person is useless. You're going to fail as a company.
So, by the way, there are two things. I mean, this is super practical. You just talked about the KPIs. If I'm an investor, I look at you and I ask you in the earning calls, what are you doing with that stuff? I'll say two other things. One is, I get this question asked all the time, what are the skills that people should learn in the age of AI? And I say, well, I think that these are the kind of things we could have that conversation. The other thing that I say, though, is we don't know. So you're asking me this question, I'm giving you an answer. In a year from now, you need to ask me again, and maybe the answer is going to be slightly different. So the only certainty you have is that if you don't have a learning infrastructure that is agile enough to cater to that change, you are going to be obsolete. So one is resources, but also build agility into the machinery. The other thing that I would say, and Tiger, you have experience with this because this is one of the things that we did together, is not just how much money you're spending in the learning and development function, etc. Is, are you taking some of your best leaders and reallocating them to do that thing as a day job?
Yeah.
And so in that day job, by the way, you don't want to cut it too narrowly. So, for example, one of the things I did in the last corporate job, which was, Genpact, a big IT services company, more than 100,000 people, that thing was the backbone of agility.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did is we said, we want learning and development transformation. So I was an innovation leader at the time. So to say, well, innovation doesn't happen through your team anymore. It happens through the entire company. So you need to build skills so that the company can innovate by itself. So they actually literally took somebody, put it into, leadership team, put it into that thing. And together with that thing, we ended up, me elbowing myself into, and, the CEO being actually acquiescent and supportive of, there's a collaboration and communication technology agenda. So we introduced, for example, collaboration tools like Zoom and Teams way earlier.
Way before anyone else.
Before everyone else.
But just for the viewers, just so they understand, what we're talking about here is when you were Chief Innovation Officer at Genpact.
That's right.
And Tiger, CEO at the time, and came to you. This is years ago as well, if I recall.
18.
Yeah, 2018. So Tiger recognizes, wow, a lot of our people, things are changing so fast. People are going to be displaced. How are we going to help our people to grow? Exactly what we've been talking about, right? And comes to you and says, what's the solution here? And then now what you're describing is a culture where you are able to share knowledge, because you said you were right. Okay. And one of them is just simply using technology as simple as Zoom.
Culture and enabling people to do that. Because the culture was, obviously Tiger was very, very strong on every day. He ended up actually hammering that point until people understood that they were on the wrong side if they weren't sharing. But the other thing was giving people the tools and the infrastructure. So we rebuilt, for example, the learning and development infrastructure, in which we created communities of learning, in which learning was curated from the people closer to the ground, closer to the domain, as opposed to just buying courseware from a bunch of places. We were reusing a lot of the knowledge that we were creating as a company and distill it in a way that people, the beginners, could become faster machine learning, data engineering, fraud analysts, and all that kind of stuff. But because we were harnessing that collective intelligence of the company and making available through the tools that we built and the processes that we built. I mean, this actually was industrialized. It's not something that you can do with just a couple of consultants in a 3 months job, right?
Right.
Yeah, and actually, this goes back not to 2018, it goes back to 2014.
Gosh.
Yeah. We all thought that our kind of an organization and many organizations have to undertake a reskilling, continuous learning, create that passion, create bite-sized learning, because no one has time and attention for, 5 days I'm going to learn and then I'm going to come back. You forget. And, create that infrastructure, the technology, start using AI to actually help. And you fast forward to today, you actually can say, this is who I am, this is what I know, this is what I'm doing. I'd like to go there because I want that job. And that job requires me to learn the following things. First of all, does it make sense? And the machine should be able to tell you, actually, don't do that, because I'm not so sure there's enough hiring happening there. There's enough demand there. My view is go to these other 3 places. There's a lot of demand there, and you can actually create a bridge of these 5 things that will help you get there in terms of learning. So there are 5 steps. So those 5 steps might take 6-7 months. I go through those different steps. And it's visible to everyone that I've actually finished step 1, step 2, step 3. Everyone knows it. When I finish step 5, lots of people know. And then AI will pick me up and say, great job available. Take it.
There was this group of MBAs, they were asked, for your next job, what's really important to you? And I think MBAs, they follow the 5 Ps, like pay, people, place, platform, meaning the company, and there's a couple of other things. What's the 5th one? It'll come to me when I'm not thinking about it.
Purpose,
maybe. The number 1 thing is actually growth. They want to go to an organization that is set up structurally to set them up for success. 2014, how number of people then compared to now at Genpact? It's over 120,000 now.
Yeah. I mean, now it's 130,000.
Must have been 50.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a differentiator for companies and to set themselves up for success and their employees. But then I think about the future and will there be 200,000 people, companies in the future? You spoke about that young lady who is building a successful company with just 3 people. Sam Altman talks about the 1-person billion-dollar company. Okay, it's 1 person, but then there's going to be thousands of bots that they're working with, right? So what's your view on, we're moving into this agent-driven workplace, aren't we? What does that look like? What does that mean?
So I think the 2 will coexist. If things go the right way, we will have economic expansion, which means that you'll have both type of companies. What Tiger was talking about is a bunch of companies can actually do the net new stuff faster than the older companies because they literally don't have a box to kind of box people into, right? They just go and by the way, there's hundreds of thousands of them. You only see the ones that succeed, but most of them fail. But, people don't care. The startups don't care about your definition of the market. They care about what they think that the market will take. And large companies, typically, they have a very strict definition of the market. When I started working at BCG, one of the first things that it taught us is if you segment the market wrong, you'll never innovate. And most big companies actually end up segmenting the market wrong. So they segmented the way they've always segmented, and therefore you don't innovate anymore because you don't know, the iPhone wasn't a mobile phone. Yeah, people thought it was a mobile phone. It wasn't. The reality is, I think you'll have both. But one thing is sure is that the bigger you become, you better use your scale to your advantage. Large companies suffer from these economies of scale very often because it's hard to collaborate. Things are interlocked, matrices, makes things really hard. And also they lose a little bit of the energy. Because when you're a large company, you're very disconnected from what really makes an impact, so people can sit back. Small companies are not like that, because if you don't push and you don't go in the right direction, you're gone, right? And so a bunch of large companies will suffer. If they're lucky, they go into managed decline. If they're unlucky, they just get pulled the plug on, very unceremoniously. A lot of the value that we can derive from AI is from the proprietary data that you have.
Right.
And large companies tend to have truckloads of those, either theirs or through their ecosystems. Remember, these companies don't work in isolation. They have partners, etc. If they manage to get that thing brought to bear, then they have a really strong competitive advantage compared to everybody else. But most companies are not built like that, right? And they don't look at competitiveness through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's still bright days ahead for the right type of large companies, because if you do that, your large size becomes an economy of scale driver. Because the more data you have, the more smart you become compared to everybody else. But if you don't harness that data and you don't use AI to harness that data, then your weight is just flab. Right?
Yes,
and it will just slow you down.
Yes.
Take that train of thought. So large companies have more data, have more customers, etc. That is proprietary, that's theirs. And therefore they can use AI to actually create solutions that only they can create. So therefore they can become winners. The challenge for large companies, as Gianni described, is they become slower at decision making. They become lesser experimentative because some of those experiments are creating solutions that will destroy your existing solution. And you worry that if that happens, you're going to lose the revenue that you're getting from your existing solution. But you have to do that. Why? Because one, you can do that more easily now. So one of the things that AI is going to do is allow a large company to actually have a culture of 1,000 companies inside. Each of them are startups. The danger in that historically has been I lose control. I lose control on who's spending what money, on what dollars are being spent in investing on 1,000 different ideas. Actually, if we spend all of that on only 2 ideas, those 2 ideas are going to take off. I'm not going to allow 1,000 ideas to be done. That's the world of a large company. That's why it gets tight. Because I don't want 1,000 ideas to flower. I actually want to select. And I want to allocate capital to those selected few. Because that's my strength. Because I have a lot of capital. Now in a world of AI, you actually can allow 1,000 experiments and very quickly shut down 995. Right? The speed at which you can experiment, get information, and shut down in order to choose the 2 or 3, and then launch another 1,000, and then the speed at which you can drive innovation by having a startup culture and an ecosystem of 1,000 companies inside a large company. The only strength of that large company is the fact that they have very deep pockets to invest. They can therefore conduct 1,000 experiments.
Yeah.
Small companies cannot conduct 1,000 experiments. Therefore, I can choose the 3 winners. Small companies cannot. They have to make a bet without experiments. That's the danger. And then I have a culture that actually takes the $1,000 that I now have available and directs it to the 3. And by the way, all the data that is being collected by these smaller groups is all mine, is all the companies.
Yeah.
So that's the data moat. So combination of data moat, strength of how much I can spend, but the problem that I had of not innovating fast, I've solved for it because AI is helping me solve for it. How do I leverage AI to change the way I work to actually work like a startup of 1,000 startups in a company? And the other thing that you were asking were teams and jobs. I think one of the things AI is going to do is actually increase team sizes. So I have a view, I've always had a view, Gianni knows this, that in a world where there's an open culture with fast information flow, even 15 years back, 20 years back, I thought leaders should have 25 people who work for them. Right? That's not the way traditional organizations are set up. Big leaders have 7 or 8 people. Each of them have 7 or 8 people. Right? My view is that if you can find a way to run teams of 25, 30 people, it's actually pretty cool. And that's why we were constantly searching for technologies that will help. In the world of AI, where information collection, finding the answers, dissemination is all real time, is all virtual, is all available always, the role of this person who pulls information together and packages it and gives it to you is going to become zero. So team sizes should go up 4 or 5 times. Therefore, levels should go down 3 or 4 times. Large companies should have a CEO, and within 3 or 4 levels should get down to the customer. That speed of information flow will happen because your ability to manage. What do you think, Gianni?
I think it's a really cool thought. And actually, a lot of knowledge can be institutionalized in tools that help. I mean, the middle management gets a bad rap, but there's a lot of value in what they do because they are the custodians of institutional informal knowledge. Now, and also they help people cooperate, etc.
And they connect the dots.
But part of that can be done by machine.
Yeah.
You don't need to have 3 layers of people who all remember. I mean, it's a very intriguing thought. To your point, it's going to be flatter, but it's going to be flatter with a lot more AI co-workers in that thing. Because, literally every layer will now be supported by machines that kind of act as a whisperer to the middle manager and say, in that situation, this is how you deal with that. Well, this is how we dealt in the past. And they will ask you questions. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, we all know that there are technologies available today. And all I can say guaranteed is it's going to keep improving. Where you have 5 people who come into a meeting and the technology listens to the meeting. The meeting ends at 10 a.m., 1-hour meeting. You walk out of the meeting and you walk back to your room at 10:01, and you have a summary of the meeting. You have a key takeaways. You have action plans. You have 20 questions that were asked in that 1 hour and the 20 answers to those questions. You have, here are the people who should be told about it. You have an email that's drafted and ready all in 1 minute. And you just decide, I'm going to send this. I think I'll send this. I'll send this. Done. So the speed of decision making, the speed of dissemination, the speed of therefore experiments and shutting down experiments is just mind-boggling. And therefore, when 5 people got together, there was always someone's job to note take. There was someone's job to summarize. There was someone's job to then synthesize. There was someone's job to communicate it back. And sometimes that would take 3 or 4 days. And that's time lost.
Time lost. Yeah, apparently there's a fact that 32 days of the year are lost just trying to find information. 13% of the payroll. This is very, very, very interesting. So I understand now that organizations are going to become far, far flatter. And Tiger, you talk about 1,000 startups. It's interesting because when I think about when I was working at Google and Microsoft, every department felt like a startup actually. And so now we're talking about empowered teams when using AI strategically and empowering individuals. You've got all these creative generalists. Do you think that the secret source of a creative generalist then is the way in which, where I'm going with this is the data side. We're drowning in data. Is the key thing here then the way in which they encode the data so that it becomes easier to retrieve? So I'm almost thinking about like a second brain. So the way in which the data is encoded.
I think the data, when you're talking about data, is knowledge in general, right? It can be quantitative, structured, unstructured. I think one of the things that we haven't fully realized as a society is that this new class of machines that we have in generative AI takes pretty much everything and encodes stuff. I mean, the architecture of this thing is one that takes all our blurb and makes it a mathematical representation of adjacency between ideas, concepts, words, etc. So one of the biggest things, when you have large companies, the issue is a lot of the knowledge is tacit and it's in the heads of a bunch of people. You don't quite know how to pull it out. People can't find it. Sometimes you need to go up in the hierarchy to go and ferret it out. And that actually is just super dysfunctional. The ability of these machines to actually encode data in a way that is retrievable, right? They have this encoder, decoder kind of architecture in these machines. Is, I think, one of the things that we will look at in 15 years from now and think this has changed our collective brain, what MIT we call superminds, because it really allows you to harness a much bigger amount of knowledge without choking people. Yeah? Back to the point that humans cannot digest too much, but you can interrogate these machines in a way that they just give you what you need. And they go and find that information in many different places. Look, this is transformative. I mean, when we seen that in our brain structure changed. So that has been a few thousand years ago. And now we're talking about the brain structure of a company or an organization. I mean, you can talk about this in the context of governments as well. So I think we haven't seen anything yet. The thing I think is a problem is that we're talking about concepts and we have a bunch of technologies. But if you were to give this job to someone in the organization today, it would be a split between the CIO, maybe the CTO, maybe the business leaders, maybe HR, etc. And all these disciplines should be flattened out, and there should be a discipline of augmentation of collective intelligence. Obviously, I'm partial to this. But you need to have people cut across all these things and pull these things together in the service of the humans, by the way, not just in the service of some database somewhere, but really cut across disciplines.
So I just want to, it just struck me an interesting idea on the way companies can and will run when you described that in a large organization, there's actually a lot of amazing knowledge that sits in people's heads, in groups of people's heads, and they talk about it. And then there are other people whose job it is to pull out that information, put it together, pull it out from 1,000 places, and then make it available to everyone. It takes too long. It's very slow. It feels bureaucratic. It also feels as though you're wasting my time. I want to do my thing, and you're coming and asking me, what is it in my head? Right? Go figure. Now, it just struck me. I just described 5 participants in a meeting, 1 machine that's listening, summarizing, synthesizing, blah, blah. What if you have 1,000 machines that are participating every day in 1,000 meetings, 5,000 meetings, 5 meetings each for 5 hours a day each. And all they do is the machine switches on, participates in whatever meeting is happening, switches on in the next meeting. And that's what the machine does. In a span of 30 days, you have a full repository of all the discussion that happened in every meeting in the company. And that repository then becomes available, Gianni, to be interrogated by clever people asking clever questions. I don't need to find out who is John and does John have this tacit information. The tacit information was discussed in that group of 5 because they know this shit. So it's discussed. It's captured and available in repository. What do you think of that?
It's not just that you say, oh, who knows about this? Sometimes your company creates knowledge of a different nature and you have no idea as a CEO that thing is actually being developed. And so one of the jobs of this machine could say, there's a signal that in the vector space of the language that is being used, which is mathematically how these machines work, is different. Right? Would you want to know that some of the network segments of your company are actually coming up with new ways of thinking about certain things? As a CEO, you might actually want to pick up on some of those what is called low strength, high momentum signals, because then you want to decide, I want to amplify that one, or that one is a rabbit trail, it doesn't fit with our... So there's more.
So what is interesting in that journey is remote monitoring of signals coming from equipment has been around for quite some time. IoT, and then a central repository of data coming, let's say, from gas turbines or ultrasound or MR equipment sitting in a hospital or engines flying around in a plane is constantly being looked at to discover patterns that say, when this plane lands in Changi Airport in Singapore, take a look at the engine, because it might begin a journey of requiring maintenance 3 weeks from now. Actually, if you try and find a way to preventively maintain it now, you don't need 2-week, take the engine out to a repair shop and maintain it. This has been happening for quite some time. These kind of things. Now, because of large language model and the ability to use signal detection by listening to language signals in meetings and conversations and chats and documents that are being generated in an organization or in an ecosystem continuously. You can take weak signals, I saw the same signal in 5 places. Each of them are weak, but when you combine them, there is something happening, guys. There is something. I want to jump in now. So I want to do preventive maintenance. I want to jump into these clients, jump into these situations. I think there's a problem that's coming. And you prevent the problem from happening.
I think what we're talking about here is a knowledge management system that's amplified, right? So that your AI is now helping to democratize access to specialized knowledge across the organization. And it actually could help with your clients as well, because you don't need to have so many discovery calls.
Yeah. I just don't like the word knowledge management system.
Okay.
Because it has a old characterization of the way knowledge management systems were meant to be, which is someone contributes to it. It's then, in one place, it's in a box. You go open the box. You know what knowledge you want. Yeah. Therefore, you look at it. Versus it's a continuous flow of signals. I have no idea how much of that is knowledge. Probably 99.9% is crap.
Yeah.
It goes into the box. I don't need to decide what should go into the box. Everything goes into the box. The problem with knowledge management systems is you need gatekeepers to put it into the system. You put anything into the box. Yes. I just go and ask the question of the box, and the box gives you an answer. One of the most interesting conversations I had was 25 years back. 25 years back. It's bizarre. I was with my old engineering school friend, and we were catching up after probably 10-15 years, and we were getting better at using email. And both of us reminisced about the fact that we grew up in an engineering process. At the time when we grew up, there were no computers, there were no laptops. There was nothing. Everything was handwritten, and calculators had just come out. So we were talking about, and then he asked me a question. He said, "So how do you manage your emails? Do you have folders?" I said, "Yeah." And I'm very proud of the folders I have. I've been a folder guy forever. And he said, "Do you realize that folders is an old anachronistic way of doing things?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "In the old world, people would have files. They would have paper. They would read the paper and they'll say, this paper is useless, throw it in the dustbin. This paper I want to preserve, so I put it into a file. I have a chest of drawers. I open the drawer. There are 20 files. There's another 20 files. So then when I want to retrieve something, I open the right drawer, I open the right file, I take out the paper, I look at it, and I share it with you, etc." And he said, we took that world into the world of technology, and then we created folders, and we created emails, and we put them into various folders. The problem is, you have to remember, it was also at a time when storage was expensive, speed of retrieval was slow, and searching was difficult. Right. By the time we had this conversation, I guess it was probably 15 years back, 20 years back, he said, search is getting cheaper and cheaper, storage is getting cheaper and cheaper, and the ability to retrieve is getting easier and easier. So, do not have folders. Have one mega giant inbox. He actually said, you don't even need to delete emails. Just dump everything. And then you search. You'll get what you want. Yeah. I thought it was I still use folders.
Yes, but by the way, the other problem with folders is once you put something in a folder, is not in another folder.
That's the problem.
A lot of what we have these days don't fit neatly into that folder or the other. And when you just look at that thing.
Though new email technologies allow you to tag something into 3 folders.
Exactly. Yeah. But what you're saying is, freaking machine should target stuff, right? And I think that's actually super powerful because then you can connect the dots a lot more.
And that's where the way things are going, right? Like if I think about my photographs, I've given up on tagging them.
Apple is going to be really good at doing those things, searching the stuff that you have on your computer so that you finally find things.
Yeah, so I actually, first of all, we all have 10,000 photographs on our phones. Why? Because we don't delete them. Because we don't need to. Right? The problem is searching for them. I've always wanted, I want to search for this one friend who I know I met somewhere. And I remember it was, by the beach. So all I need to do is type the name of the friend, beach, and something. And it'll show up 5 photographs, and it's one of them.
Now, when we think about a future then where everything that you've ever experienced, like all of your photographs that you've been taken, everything that you've ever read, everything that you've ever listened to, all gets deposited into, say, a large language model, right? This is where things start to get super interesting, I think. So, Tiger, you could have your own LLM. Gianni, you've got yours as well. If you think about, and I'm sitting here with 2 big brains, 2 big thinkers, what then, when you think about the future of knowledge and learning, what sort of questions pop into your minds about where this could go? Because personally, when I think about someone like a Tiger and Gianni having their own LLM, I think, oh my God, talk about taking a personal brand onto another level. Like you could become productized. So what do you think of when you in your shower and you think about a question like, oh, interesting. I wonder what X, Y, Z might look like.
I'm super buoyant about the opportunity because I do think that this will augment us individually, also collectively. So actually, I don't know if we're going to just have an LLM that is or a language model or a generative AI model that is for us. It might actually be something that is for our teams and our collective knowledge gets stored. So that has a different level of, for certain things I will have my own, and for certain things I'll have my teams, and then maybe the company has its own. The thing, though, that I think is super important, right now we actually have most of the tools, and the thinking that we did today could be translated into actual services. I'm pretty sure Microsoft is looking at that kind of things, etc. Yeah. And the thing that we haven't fully solved yet, and I think the issue that we'll need to face is we sit here in Europe. London still counts as Europe. Sorry. There's a lot of pushback on the privacy implications, GDPR, all that kind of things are kind of found somewhat half-baked solutions. I've heard that there are people, and that hasn't happened to me, but there are people who actually refused in meetings in large companies here in the UK, actually global companies, just heard from people in the UK, refused recording and transcription. So basically say, you cannot record this call. I don't want this AI to transcribe what it said. To me, that is both disturbing.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's very human. And when things are very human, you can't just dismiss them away. It's actually a useful signal that we need to solve for. Yeah. Because if we allow that thing to happen, it's like you're lobotomizing collective brains. Yeah. Literally at every point in time, you say, this thing will be censored. Yeah. And we haven't gotten a solution to that. And a lot of people are just saying, I don't want this. And they're allowed to not want this. Yeah. Whereas though they were invited to that meeting and they wouldn't stay with their mouth shut in that meeting. But literally from a AI augmented collective intelligence standpoint, they would be mouth shut. They basically say, this meeting was between people who couldn't talk. From a collective intelligence standpoint. I mean, it's actually not...
But there's going to come a time, Gianni, when you don't need to talk for me to know what you're thinking. Oh, that's happening. Yeah. It's already been demonstrated that you can think, and in New York, and a robotic arm in Tokyo will move because you thought about making that robot move. It's been done. It's already been done. Because, after all, it's now been done that you can have the right neurons fire that moves a robotic arm because your arm's got amputated because you had a problem, and that can move. If that signal can travel like this, it can travel wirelessly as well. So it's been actually demonstrated and it's been shown.
I think I moved the goalpost, but actually I can guarantee you that somebody in Brussels will come and say that is not legal. And by the way, they might actually have a reason to say that, but that doesn't mean that everything should be made illegal.
Yeah.
We should give people frameworks
Yeah.
and incentives to do the right thing. So, I'm trying, I don't want to be a part of it. I mean, I'm an innovation person.
So Gianni, you and I were chatting yesterday. So let's say you're an author and you're going to write your next book. What does writing a book look like in 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
I think the question to be
As edgy as you can get.
so the question is actually, what is the experience of a book going to look like?
Yeah,
for the
that's one
reader?
question. Yeah.
So writing a book is a means to an end, right? I mean, actually, some people do write because it's useful for them.
Yeah.
I do
yeah.
that too.
I do that too. Yeah.
But
I've not written a book, but I write many
you
books
write
that I
them?
throw into the dustbin.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
should write a book.
But so the idea is, look, I mean, it's always been a book is, since we invented the press, is a way of getting a bit of a brain dump from somebody who's actually thought very deeply about things that I care about. That's what it is. If you frame it that way, now we have the ability to have a brain dump that is more accessible, because instead of needing to turn 300 pages and kind of follow the prose, and sometimes people are better thinkers than writers, and I can have the author engaged, but not like I'm going to go to a book presentation and I can ask questions to the author. I'm going to have a digital twin of that particular part of the author's brain that is the book. The book is a digital twin of the author, but just, a static one and for a certain part of the thing. So suppose that you write a book on something. I'm certainly writing stuff. People don't want to read my 300 pages. People want to have that thing as a lens to think about the things that they care about in a new and different way.
Yep.
I mean, some element of books that are for entertainment, beautiful to read long prose because it takes your brain somewhere else, flow, etc. But for a bunch of people, a business book, you don't read it because you have fun. I mean, you can actually read something else. You want your ideas to change because these people have a different lens. But you don't need to read 300 pages. What I would want to have is a book that takes, I write about augmentation of collective intelligence. I write of organization looking like brains. And if you can organize that way, your organizations are better. What skills does it require? All that kind of stuff that we can talk about. But do I need to have people to read 250 pages of that thing? Or people will come to me and say, look, I have a problem with employee engagement. I'm in this company. This is a competition. I have this kind of people. I have engagement issues. How would your thinking help me solve my problem? And now with language models, and I've actually experimented and the prototypes I've built actually show very clearly that if you curate the right parts of your book, you put it in a language model, and then the audience interfaces with the language model.
Yeah.
I still hope that people will go through my 250 pages, but a lot of people will just say, look, I have 15 minutes. I give you 15 minutes. Okay, can you give me something that changes my life? You can already do that. And I think I'll be super transformative on one side because, I mean, if you write a book, I'd love to read your book. But it's also what I like is talking to you. Talking. So, brain synchronizes, do you build on stuff?
It's an earlier evolution of the brain, audio, than writing and reading. Writing and reading is much more recent.
Language, right?
Language is much
By the way, you can do language with these things
Yeah.
incredibly well. So I'd love to do that. And then at some point, what is going to be super wild? You ask me, edgy? I'm going to have digital twins of books of people talking to other digital twins of books of people. So my book will talk to your book. Why? And do permutations, combinatorial. Just go expand your space of, are there intersections, are things that I can learn from you, you can learn from me. And obviously you still want to have the human in the loop at some point. These machines will create a curation and say, hey, there's 15 things that might actually be interesting for you today. Because, machine knows what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do, etc. You can go really edgy. The 250 pages pulp and paper based means of information isn't the book.
You know, it's interesting when Gianni described what kind of books will get there faster. He talked about, business books, knowledge books, etc. What will not get there faster is stories, because it has emotion, it has, and then you wonder why some people, and I'm in one of those people, prefer reading business books if it is told as a story with humans, with blood, with sweat, with tears, with tragedy, with romance, with all of that. When those stories are told that way, one, they are real, if they're real, factual, they're business books and business learnings, but they're told that way. I mean, for me, they fly off my shelf and I read them. And I think those may not go down the path that Gianni described. So, because you have to inject it with human emotion. And then I prefer these days listening rather than reading, primarily, because I think that I can get emotion into what I'm listening better. Under one condition, I really want to only listen to the author. If it's a narrator who's narrating something that someone else has written, I'm not a big fan of that, because I want to hear the emotion of the author when the author wrote this sentence, and I need the author to tell me that. Now, some authors actually narrate and some authors don't, so that's my thing. But I think consumption of information is probably going to go even more towards audio, which is why I love podcasts.
Yes.
Versus, now there are some things, your 2x2 that you described earlier are better done visually, but those are diagrams, those are visual representations, those are time representations as things change over time. They are representations in color, much more difficult unless you actually draw it. So a written book to me must have 40% of the written book should be visual.
Yes.
Should not be just words. Then the written book has value.
Right. Or multimodal, right? So audio, video, written, that's the future. And one thing I must say is thank you to both of you for sharing your stories with me, your business stories. And I know our audience will have taken away a lot. So future conversations to come. Thank you, Gianni. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you've made it to the end, please subscribe and I'll make sure more stories show up in your feed of leaders who make people stronger, leaders better, and business bigger. Thanks for being here.